All right, we are live for a Thursday edition of the Mike and Mario Show, and yeah, well, what a hell of a week it's been thus far in reference to the contagion and how it's a lot worse than they would like for us to believe that it is. And of course, Mario, you've been keeping a good eye on things, and I've been trying to do my best to stay above water with this. But um, so I guess with the special collaboration to help stabilize things up this upcoming Sunday, Monday, head into this week due to Credit Suisse, everything in between. So that was a GSIB that was exposed, and it's just one of many to come. But what was your thoughts? Oh, first of all, Mario, how are you doing?
I, I'm all right, Mike, and thank you for doing the show on Thursday because tomorrow I'm going to play the golf season here is starting. It's getting, well, it's not that warm, but hopefully it will warm up. So I'm playing a tournament tomorrow. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that. But as you said, uh, last Sunday, UBS basically, and basically the Swiss government
Mhm.
backstopped UBS purchase of Credit Suisse,
Yeah.
and it also the regulators sort of wrote down like $17 billion worth of these AT1 bonds, and people are upset. The the high net worth investors, hedge funds that play in this market of cocoa bonds, they're called, or AT1 bonds. And the reason the regulator had to let these bonds go is that if they the only way to convert them into equity would have been if Credit Suisse would have collapsed, but
Mhm.
they didn't want it to collapse because if it collapsed it would have triggered that daisy chain of derivatives we've spoken about so many times.
Yeah.
So what they did, there's two options. They could have let Credit Suisse collapse and then those bonds would convert into equity, but they wouldn't be worth much.
Mhm.
And the second option is for the Swiss government to help backstop a purchase of Credit Suisse, but the condition for that would be to just wipe out those investors,
Mhm.
and that's what happened. But we also saw the Fed announce on Sunday that they reopened daily swap lines
Mhm.
to other central banks. And what does that mean? It just means that the Fed will print as many dollars as the ECB needs, and vice versa. The ECB will print as many euros, and the Bank of England, and they're just printing money to lend to each other. And the
Yeah.
last time they instituted this daily swap line was in March of 2020. And we know what happened after that. And I noticed last week as well, the Fed's balance sheet has gone up, even though they're doing QT. They said
Yeah.
yesterday they're going to continue to do QT, but they're doing QE, 300
Yeah.
billion. So this afternoon, US time, it will be interesting to see how much more the Fed's balance sheet has gone up since last week. So, yes, we've had rate hikes by the Fed yesterday, the BOE today, just to pretend that things are okay, but I think they're far from okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it was amazing, when this emergency active action came out about them collaborating for liquidity purposes. And so this was as a result of, as you mentioned, what's going on in Switzerland. And I was talking about earlier in the week that all it takes is just one GSIB to be exposed, and it happened to be Credit Suisse, and of course UBS came in and with the help of the Swiss backstopping them. And I'm thinking like, so they intermingle two banks that are also on the same pathway. They're carrying stuff that's just beyond serviceable at this point. Everybody's underwater taking major losses. So not only do we got the regional banks, we got the big banks, and then also central banks are taking losses. And so with this rate hike stuff, so I want to definitely touch on some of the events. So as you mentioned, we have the Federal Reserve hiking still, the Bank of England hiking, and then we have Dutch central bank reports first loss since 1931 amid rising interest rates. And another article here talks about Switzerland. It said it wasn't just Credit Suisse, Switzerland itself needing a rescuing. So central banks, they're trying to be the backstop, but then again, what's the backstop for them? And how long can they continue to take on losses, by taking all this government debt onto their balance sheet, providing counterfeit currency to prop up banks before this loop becomes a black hole that just sucks the entire global economy down? Like how much longer? Because even with gold and silver prices right now doing pretty good, people are realizing the flight to safety is definitely not, in the hands of sovereign debt as well as fiat currency. So it's getting sticky out here, Mario.
Yeah, there's nothing to backstop central banks. really, except maybe just money printing out of thin air with no loans or conditions that would be like Weimar. And that's what they're doing pretty much. They keep kicking the can down the road. The Fed announced, of course, a couple of weeks ago, almost now, that they'd be paying like banks par on paper that's like worth a lot less than par. That, in
Yeah,
my view, that's money printing. But you were talking about the Dutch central bank,
yeah,
biggest loss since 1931. What happened in 1931? Well, uh, Britain had to go back off the gold standard. So countries like the Netherlands had a lot of sterling balances, so they lost a lot. The other thing, there's a major Austrian bank called Credit and Stout
hmm
that went bankrupt. And that eventually led to a daisy chain of bank failures that went all the way to the United States. By 1933, a lot of US banks were failing. It took a little longer, of course, than nowadays because everything is, a lot of it is digital nowadays. And you sent an article about that too. But what
yeah,
happened to Credit and Stout is that a lot of German banks had lent to Credit and Stout, and a lot of American banks had lent to German banks. So they were all interconnected back then in 31, and they're
hmm
all interconnected now. And it's interesting that they're making huge losses now as well, not just the Netherlands central bank or the Dutch central bank, but the Swiss central bank. We heard a few weeks ago that they lost 132 billion francs in the last year, and
yeah,
they're bailing out Credit Suisse. No, they're not. It's the Swiss public that is backstopping everything, and I think it's a bad sign for central banks. And going back to the Dutch central bank, I think last year, you probably remember, the head of the Dutch central bank said they have a gold card that they can use to
hmm
help reliquify their balance sheets,
hmm
and that's to let the price of gold, go moon, go to the moon, so that the gold that they have on their balance sheet becomes, covers all the losses.
yeah. Now, as you're talking and describing the events that were taking place in Europe and how they were making their way over here to the U.S., the next thought that came to mind is during our, banking issues we start having here, i.e., Great Depression jumped off, and not too much longer after all that got underway, then we had this right here. Let me just put this on the screen here. Executive Order 6102, which happened to be about not allowing the citizens to, as they put it, hoard gold coins, and of course the gold confiscation or whatever, however it was painted. And so gold was the anchor of that. The problem was is too much, I guess, credit slash unknown of the banking contagion. And so the only thing that was holding them back was the fact that gold was in the people's hands in the form of real money. And so they had to bring that in. Of course, we monetize gold. But so, does all pathways in this contagion lead to gold for the banks themselves as the surefire way to reestablish trust among themselves? Because as of right now, I'm assuming we've already lost more people are losing confidence in their banking structure, being able to get funds when they need it, how they want it. So clearly on the central bank side, they have to be also concerned with trust amongst themselves, because eventually they're gonna start turning on each other. Somebody's gonna break the protocol of hiking until infinity to ultimately break something before they pivot and as you mentioned, the gold window is open back up for some countries. Like, hey, we need to backstop this our damn selves. So, but yeah, it's still early, man. Just the start of spring, Mario.
Yeah, and I think the Bank of Canada, they've stopped raising rates, I think,
Yeah,
recently.
I
But
saw that
yeah, the what were you saying there about gold? I
about following the banking crisis. Then gold became a issue of which the U.S. addressed with the executive order,
Oh
and
yeah,
then
yeah, no, but something you said later on, I just forgot. But anyway,
it'll come back.
yeah, can't be
So,
too.
So yeah, so somebody let me see it. So Lawrence Franklin just mentioned, says, talk about UK, 10% inflation, 4% interest rates equal UK in big trouble.
I would argue that 10% is more like, if you look at the retail price index, which was the index that was used prior to new labor coming into power in the late 90s, that's
Mhm.
at almost 14%. So the real rate of interest in the UK is still highly negative. So, but the Bank of England, they're saying, well, that's going to come down massively later on this year. And so we don't need to raise rates that much. I think rates in the UK should be more like 20% if they want to stop prices rising. In the US, maybe the same, maybe a little less, maybe 15% if you look at the CPI through the eyes of shadow stats.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like based upon their response to the current events within the banking sector, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't signal to me that they're going to willingly reverse course. Like they're going to stay hard pressed on moving forward. Their foot is still on the gas as far as hiking. At the same time, they're taking losses. They're leaking out the back end, but they're still trying to press forward. Now, my question would be, given its current pathway and trajectory and speed at which the banking contagion is unraveling, not to mention all the other things. I saw some about commercial real estate here is coming due, and it's to the tune of billions and everything else. Like, what will be that pivoting point? Will it be an event, external event? And of course, the uranium enrichment being sent to Ukraine, we know that's something that the UK is really trying to press. Putin's made it clear that, hey, we're not going to take that, so we'll see. But will it be to press the war button rather than continue to take these losses? So they need an excuse. Is it time for an excuse before we get into summer? Because it's hard to find all these lies. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think they have their excuse already. The banking situation. I know they've raised rates, but underneath the surface, they're actually like pumping up a lot of funny money into the system. We saw that swap line reopening, daily swap line, the
Yeah.
Fed's balance sheet going up. So they already have that excuse, I think. But yeah, the geopolitical situation is interesting. You saw yesterday, maybe, and I spoke about it this morning in my video, that when Xi Jinping was leaving the Kremlin to go back home yesterday, he said, "We're going to make the biggest change in 100 years, and
Yeah.
I hope you're behind it with me." And Putin said, "Yes, I am." What's the biggest change? Well, it's going into another monetary system, I would say, or a parallel one. It doesn't mean they're going to stop using the dollar, but they're definitely going to focus on this new, if you want to call it BRICS or Bretton Woods 3, as some have called it. And I think this might, I don't know what will trigger some kind of pivot, but this could be the reason they do it. They might use another cover for it. So who knows?
Yeah. So mentioning change is underway clearly. And so what I meant excuse or cover up is more so like the Western banking cartel or whoever we want to call them, whatever they'll be known in history books, they always like to point the blame. And so right now the banks are having issues. Central banks themselves are having issues. Now I say an escape or an excuse, meaning a war card or something of that nature. My thing is I doubt and I find it hard to believe that the West will sit around and just let these events happen out east without them pressing it to where they need an excuse to point back as to why our banking system is doing so bad now. And of course, they try to use here, they're using the Trump DeSantis political distraction on one side to divert people's attention because Trump was supposed to be arrested on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, yada yada yada, distractions. And then so my thing is usually there's a point they point the blame directly, like the whole lockdown was due to the health. Now the banking will be because of I'm thinking
Well,
cyber. I mean,
there might be a false flag, like you said, a cyber attack, and they're going to blame the Russians and the Chinese. TikTok, they're going on a lot about TikTok, aren't
right.
they? So it's difficult to say, but it's definitely getting to a point, I think, where the central banks and governments in the West are between a rock and a hard place because they have to try to convince the public that they're fighting inflation, but at the same time, they have a huge banking crisis on their hands.
Right. And that's interesting that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place because in the middle of that happens to be the currency. And so, of course, the best way, and I'm saying, like, I think a lot of people have learned over the last week or so in reference to being able to actually get out of the banks what you think is yours because you're a creditor, and the risk now falls on you from a systemic global event. Everybody who does banking in general, the traditional legacy banking model is being uprooted right now. And so the only thing that is available is to take physical possession more of your own financial dealings. And that happens to be, of course, with gold and silver and everything between.
Yeah, I
But
think, sorry, what's interesting, sorry to interrupt you, is that people are realizing that what we have in the banks is not real money.
mm-hmm.
Real money was what people had in the bank prior to the executive order in 1933. They went with the banknote, the Federal Reserve note, whatever they were using back then, and they wanted to take their money out, i.e., gold.
Mm-hmm.
That's what real money is. What we have today in the banks is not even money. It's like you said, a promissory, a credit you've lent to the bank, unsecured loan. So when people wake up and realize that there's no money in the banks, then all hell could break loose. But it's really tricky to explain to people who've been conditioned to think that the paper that we hold is money. Even us sometimes use the terms interchangeable.
Currency money, yeah. Yeah, and so like, I think pretty soon, if not before the end of this year, the primary question will be what's in the vault. Like literally, like, and I like to reference, old banking where you had a vault and it was more of a depository where you deposited your coinage and you, of course, got some redemption, you got some temporary. This is a silver certificate here that I keep as like just a little piece, but it talks about, in silver payable to the bearer on demand, demand, which those days are gone, but fiat currency was always meant to be redeemable until modern banking with computers and things of that nature have been predominantly digital now. But, what's in your vault? Like being able to actually see something in the vault
Yeah,
that is yours, is allocated for you, particularly like you. It's going to be the new modern banking.
actually, I did a video maybe over a week ago about how much actual paper, notes there are in U.S. bank vaults. And believe it or not, the Fed used to publish this data. It's called Vault Cash, and they stopped publishing it in September of 2020. I wonder why. But back then, there's only 95 billion. All the U.S. banks kept 95 billion in total in their vaults, which on average was only $230 per depositor. So even the money that's not real money, they have almost nothing in there in their vaults. So
Yeah, and then factor in with the scam, or say scam or confidence game of ensuring through FDIC what you put into the banks, like how it worked for the last 100 plus almost 100 years after the Great Depression, where that whole idea of insuring up to a certain point. Now the regulators are now have to address that entire amount in general, just because majority of the people in those big banks are above that threshold. So now it's like, okay, do I need more accounts under 250,000, or are you going to insure up to whatever? Now, assuming they're discussing that now, will that buy them some time if they reassure people up to say 10 million, 15 million, or whatever the threshold that they're going to try to create to keep funds in there? So will that buy them some time, or it's already too late?
Well, Janet Yellen a couple of days or 3 days ago said that they would basically guarantee everything. But then yesterday she walked back on that and said they're not looking to do that. But you spoke about the FDIC. They only have like about 125 billion in assets. And I was listening to Lynette Zhang yesterday from ITM Trading, and she said that they let the Fed and the Treasury let the FDIC keep that because they would have, if they had used that for SVB, the FDIC would have had no assets. So what the Fed did is the Fed lent the FDIC like 148 billion. So it's like that little clip that's going around of three guys giving $10 to each other, saying you owe me 20, I'll give you 10. So what we have now is the FDIC, the Fed, and the Treasury playing a shell game. And I think people are not that stupid. At least a lot of people are not that stupid to buy into that. And I think that's why this banking crisis is far from over, and that's why I think you need to keep stacking it. I bought a few ounces today of silver, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, man. The flight to safety, redeeming paper and digits into something tangible and for real that you have direct access to or can get hold of if need be is going to be the new modern banking. So I wonder, like, if I was go ahead.
I remember what you were saying earlier because I said I forgot. You were saying that all roads will lead to gold and silver, but a lot of people think it's going to lead to like Ripple, which I'm sorry to say it's a technology. It's not a monetary asset. I just wish people wouldn't fall for that trap of Ripple. I see a lot of that out there. This quantum financial system just seems like. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, and I'm of the same mindset. It's no coincidence that software has become the preferred method of exchange for everybody, to where having a piece of the ledger in the form of a token gives a perception of like having access to value on demand when you need it. And I use an example of Hedera Hashgraph a week or two ago. They shut the whole network down because of a possible glitch. And in that moment, you couldn't get on and get off to do any activity with your coins, even though they're on your ledger. You got your keys, they are yours, not your coin, not your keys, whatever. You can have all that on your own side. But if the network, there's a compromise on that ledger of any kind, you won't be able to transact. And I think the grand event, the grand finale, when we transition out of this into whatever they're going to try to bring us into, it's going to be exposing that whole decentralized space as being a not a fraud or sham, or could be, but it's going to be a one of aha, I got you. You know what I'm saying? Like the whole transition, we needed all this to get to this digital transition, and we gave the people certain projects and coins to make them think that this was a pathway to freedom, but you're still in the system that they're recreating for themselves, and I don't see no freedom at the end of it. But along the way, you can probably make funds.
I remember looking at Hedera Hashgraph quite a few years ago. They're coming out and was supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread in terms of but one thing that bothered me is that the two guys who started it, they're all military guys, and I thought U.S. military. That doesn't that just I think Air Force or something, and that didn't pass the smell test for me. And now that you mentioned that they shut it down recently, temporarily,
literally just like stopped it, stop all transactions because of there being some type of possible glitch or whatever. And when I saw that, I tweeted about it, shared my 2 cents on. I'm thinking, like, if it happens, every centrally controlled ledger, which happens to be the Ripples and everything like that, they are in cooperation, I think, with a much different agenda than giving people freedom and choice to be able to get rich once the Federal Reserve, prints the currency to oblivion and the Bitcoin is worth $1 billion. Like, so if it has a CEO, if it has a designer and a creator, and it has a central office in California and Silicon Valley, I would be concerned, because at some point the governments are going to turn on all these centralized entities. And do you think those centralized entities are going to let their business model and their livelihoods go under, or will they comply with government regulatory, KYC on ramp, off ramp? Your coins won't be able to move until you put your digital ID in and type of stuff. So, but hey, we ain't got to that point yet. But I'm just telling people, tread with caution. Just because it's not set up to free you, it's more so to entrap you. But anyway, okay, we got some more subjects to talk about. So let me get here. Let me get some more stuff on the table here. What else do you want to talk about? I just want to pivot. You want to touch on that uranium situation, like from Ukraine? Like,
I mean, I heard about it recently, the last 24 hours, and I think when Putin and Xi Jinping, when they're having the press conference, Putin said that the UK is sending shells to the Ukraine with depleted uranium, but the UK is saying that that's normal. Oh, they've always had depleted uranium in their shells. But then you hear the guy from the UN, like a spokesperson, saying that people should not use these. And I think it's serious. It just goes to show how the West, the Anglo-American axis is trying to provoke the Russians, and it could be one of these events that you're talking about to give an excuse to the central banks and governments to pump up the money and credit, some kind of hopefully not some kind of kinetic war, but it's worrying, and it's disturbing that the UK is actually admitting they've done it and they think it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed another thing between the Nord Stream pipeline being sabotaged, this uranium situation. Uh, you throw out another one or two events done by the West to put pressure, of course, sanctions, and Russia still has their funds being held in all the accounts in Europe and yada yada yada. Putin has been very, mild tempered, just from the impression I have. We're seeing very mild manner. He has his singular focus as to what his agenda is behind all this, blocking out all the distractions, and he's pressing forward with this meeting or whatever. And we'll find out. I guess, is it this week or probably next week when Xi meets Zelensky with his 12-point plan?
Oh, I think I'm not sure. I might be mistaken. I saw a headline saying that Xi Jinping refused to meet.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I could be wrong, but the other thing as well, do you remember last week the ICC, International Criminal Court, issued an arrest warrant for
Right.
Putin? And here you have the president of China going to visit him, and he's also invited Putin to go visit him. So just goes to show that the West is desperate, and the rest of the world outside the West and NATO are not buying into what the West is saying. And I think that's another reason why our currencies, not just the dollar, all our currencies are losing. People are losing faith and confidence in them. And that's
Yeah.
not to say that the yuan or the ruble wouldn't suffer either if there was a currency collapse. But we know what they've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. They've been loading up on gold. So I think they'd be able to recover quicker than we would.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that, like I pulled up a little something real quick. And so this is from the 21st in reference to, let me get my screen here. Give me 1 second here. In reference to that visit or not. But here, this is from RT, make of it what you may. But it says Putin launched Chinese peace roadmap for Ukraine. And it says Russian President has praised Beijing's 12-point peace roadmap for Ukraine during a summit with the Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. So, barring some type of change over the last day or so, this was still on the table. I don't know what's in the details of that 12-point peace roadmap that Xi, put forth or might put forth. But if it's canceled, scrap it. But then if it's going on, it will be interesting to see what comes from that if it was to take place. Because I believe ultimately, Ukraine is dead smack in the middle of the Belt and Road Initiative. So Xi has a special interest to make sure that there's some type of deal made, because once again, and once all this blows through, I'm assuming they're wanting Belt and Road Initiative to be functional, because Europe is going to follow suit at some point. They're going to have to. I think they're going to cave. If this is not all just smoke and mirrors in the first place, and they're giving us the illusion of the West versus East, but we'll see.
Yeah, I see that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see some headlines from about 10 days ago saying that Xi to meet Putin in Moscow and speak to Zelensky. He might speak to him. I don't know if he's going to go to Kiev, but they might go on a Zoom call.
Zoom, right? I would anticipate a Zoom rather than him show up in a war zone at that time, like with like Biden and Yellen and everybody else just shaking hands, and all the actors over there in Ukraine.
Madonna's ex-husband what's that guy's name? Gave him the Oscars. Sean Penn.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Anyway, okay, keep it moving. What else we got here? Let's definitely touch on metals real quick, man. We can't not talk about that. And so I'm looking at the metals activity right now, and silver $23, man. It's hanging in there, and
we
waiting
made
on 2,000 gold.
Sorry, we made a new high for the week in silver, and I mean, I still think in dollars, gold is still really undervalued. So that makes silver even more undervalued. In our currency here in the UK, gold made a new all-time high recently at like 1,640 pounds. It did come back down, but it's back above $1,600. And I think eventually, when we break through 2,070 or thereabouts in US dollars, we could see some fireworks in the gold price, or that would just mean that the dollar is dropping.
Yeah. And fiat currencies in general, like I've already taken a nice little plunge when compared to or weighted in gold terms. So, all right, you want to get some questions? Want to take some questions?
Sure, let's have a look.
All right. Let's see what if you guys got some thoughts, ideas, suggestions, anything to keep an eye on, feel free to put it out there in the chat and we will share our 2 cents on it or something of that magnitude. And highlight everything in a dollar so to stand out more so I can see it.
Sinned Again says gold is a terrible investment. Well, gold is money, and it's the best store of value for the last few thousand years. Fiat currency always goes to zero. Gold will not go to zero. So there you go.
Yeah, and I don't consider gold and silver an investment, because when you invest something, you're usually expecting a return and something of that magnitude. But yet, gold and silver, if it is money, it's the standard and the anchor. You measure everything else in it, i.e., fiat currency. So
it might, when there's a currency or banking crisis, it almost acts as an investment, because the value of the fiat currency and everything else plummets, and gold becomes valuable, not for any reason, but just because it's there, and it doesn't default. It's always the same.
here's a statement from Carlos. Says, Mike, Mexico government going after mining companies for tax evasion in the billions. I haven't heard much about it, but I know the mining sector in general we'll probably touch on that real soon, because if gold shoots up, of course, the mining shares, depending on where they at, whatever, also. And then governments may not be might not like that too much. They might want a piece of that cut, a piece of that action. So we'll see what happens with that. What else we got? Anything? What do you see here? I see a lot of people over the last couple of days talking about Mexico joining the BRICS, and it's not official, and it's floating out there. I'm not sure where it's coming from. But
well, the thing is that I think last year Mexico and a lot of other countries said they were interested in joining the BRICS. And this is, I haven't found anything that new about Mexico joining the BRICS. It's just someone trying to start something. But I wouldn't be surprised if Mexico joins the BRICS. Why not? It makes sense, even though I don't think the US would be very happy. But what can they do now?
Said again, said gold is no different than paper.
All right, fine. I think someone said he's a troll, but
yeah, it's all fine and good. Trolls need love too. Port Philmo Co-op says, "Are bankers parasites?"
Pretty much. I would say so.
Yeah, I would say that, and I would say that the banking structure in of itself is the equivalent of a parasite in the form of like a cancer. Yeah. Like it has to spread through more credit creation and currency creation in order to stay alive, survive with its hosts. The hosts happen to be the users of the currency. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I guess let's say if you go back to banking before there were central banks, then I would say maybe a little bit. But when you issue currency out of thin air and you have nothing, backing it, it's parasitical. The fractional reserve system is parasitical. The example is if you have $100 worth of land and you make 4% a year, from your crops. The bankers have $100. They'll lend like 1,000 and make 4% on 1,000, which is a lot more than the 100. So it is parasitical, and it's a good gig. I would say.
It's a good gig.
But depository banking, though, for example, a bank that only takes deposits to safeguard your money, your gold, and takes a fee, I don't think that's parasitical. That's just a safe place to keep your money. And a lot of banks used to be like that.
Yeah, here's a statement as well. It says blockchain is more honest and the only way to stop fractional reserve banking. And
Yeah,
so
it's done really well with FTX and Celsius, isn't it?
yeah,
So
I say like you can.
blockchain, blockchain is supposed to be trustless. You don't need to trust people because it's there.
Mhm.
No one can tinker with it. But do you really want to live in a world where you can't trust people? You don't have to trust people. I think trust is very important. And
Yeah.
blockchain is just it's an instrument. It's not real value, I would
Mhm.
say.
Right. Right. And then also like the idea of verifiable, like that's one of the selling points for the whole crypto space. You can verify, don't trust, verify. Like, so give me your public address and I'll verify that you're, what I'm saying, what you're holding. I can see everything you do from start to finish. To me, that's a problem just because you want to be
It's
able
an
to see your own
invasion
transaction, but
of
you want the
privacy.
world.
It's an
Yeah.
invasion of privacy.
Right. So that's where privacy coins, to me, offer a better use case in the form
Mm.
of a currency if you wanted to use that, but you can't see everything. Yeah, I'd rather be a part of that one. Then, anyway, that's just me. Uh, it says para anti-Semitical banking. Jeff says, do you think the banking issue will help or hurt Bitcoin? What are your thoughts, Mario?
Well, I noticed in 2017 when they came out with futures for Bitcoin, and
Mm-hmm.
I saw that Goldman Sachs was getting involved. They bought some exchanges, and I thought to myself, Wall Street is going to ruin the crypto space, and this is what we've seen.
Yeah.
Um, Bitcoin, the idea of Bitcoin is not a bad idea, but it's become heavy speculative. I spoke to a friend of mine the other day. He said, "Oh, I bought some Bitcoin," and I said, "Oh, so have you got it in your own wallet?" He said, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
no, it's just a fund." I said, "Well, then you didn't buy Bitcoin, you
Mm-hmm.
know." And
Yeah.
they're trying to do the same thing to Bitcoin that they did to gold. People think that holding ETFs or futures is holding gold, but you only really have gold if you buy the physical. Yeah, someone could hold it for you in a vault, and you could go there and check it out, or you could hold it in your hand. But
Yeah, and another issue is that labeling Bitcoin as a commodity and then having a CFTC regulate the industry is like, okay, the CFTC has been caught in not regulating gold and silver and letting every piece of criminal activity from the banks,
yeah,
they completely destroy the price of gold. And like, okay, why wouldn't they do that to Bitcoin?
oh,
Anything that's a threat, they gonna definitely distort it,
yeah.
disrupt it, try to do
But
away with it. So,
it's interesting you mentioned the CFTC because I think I sent it to you. The U.S. government said that the head of precious metals trading at J.P. Morgan and some of the guys that worked for him should serve
uh-huh.
long prison sentences for spoofing the market in precious metals. So they're throwing the minions under the bus there, in my opinion, because J.P. Morgan and all the bullion banks have been aware of all this spoofing, and they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
This could mean that this manipulation game could be almost over if we're seeing
Mhm.
that.
Right.
And
The fact that that's public, like headline Bloomberg, like they're getting ready to single out and call out, the banking cartel. Interesting. Port says, did the Holocaust happen like they said it did? I wasn't there, so I only can regurgitate to you what I read from books and what I see through documentaries. So, just as much as I do. I think as much as we do, because neither one of us is there. So we'll leave it at that. But appreciate the love offering. Yeah.
Rolf
Uh,
Steiner says a
well,
pound
I know what you
sterling
say. Yo,
was
the
200
pound.
silver, 40 silver pennies yet in 8th century England. That's right. And
Interesting.
up until 1971, there's 240 pence to the pound. And
Mhm.
then they decimalized it. So now it's 100 pence to the pound. And it used to be, yeah, silver as well. But that's all gone.
Manico Mike, Andy Scheckman from Miles Franklin talked about Mexico applying for BRICS recently and South Africa BRICS meeting. Okay, I wasn't familiar with that.
Well, how, I don't know. I think maybe that it could be, but I'm not surprised, as I said.
Yeah. But it's just it's clear. Everyone sees how much influence the BRICS have, and then you add the BRICS Plus, which is the additional countries that have already put in apps or have publicly stated they're putting in apps. Just assume every nation that's been ruined and destroyed by the dollar's dominance will probably want to apply for that organization. So I wouldn't surprise me if they do.
That's right.
Next question will be, which one of the G7s, which one of the G7s will pivot and all of a sudden publicly announce that we're going to also collaborate, or we're going to, do some things differently to help out this new transition. Like that's going to be some news.
I think it's going to be, as I said, I think if you remember, A to Z instead of BRICS, isn't it?
I said you should enable slow chat to make stops trolling. Yeah. I don't know if I have the ability to do that from this particular software here to slow things down. What else we got here? It's not a default of the dollar. I don't know. All right, so what's in the cards? What do we have? We got a a week left, a week and a half left of this month. Anything pending that on the table, whether it be another meeting or anything like that, or decisions or some numbers coming out? I know you do a good job of keeping track on the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are all out. I think you have the weekly jobless claims. They come out every week. Next week, I think tomorrow there's nothing really that important. And all the major central banks, ECB, Bank of England, and the Fed have met. So I think but there's still a lot out there that could bubble from under the surface, in the banking sector. I think we need to keep an eye on that. But I don't see anything really coming out in terms of the data. They've all been out, economic data.
So nothing foreseeable, but keep an eye on another domino to drop. Basically, any minute now, another domino could drop.
First Republic Bank. Let me check where that is right now. And don't forget, First Republic, JP Morgan, and all the big Wall Street banks, they pumped $30 billion into that. So right now it's trading at $12. It's down 10%. And it's come all the way down from like $150 in the beginning of February. So this could be the next big thing, First Republic Bank. That could be something that blows up over the weekend, and they have to save this bank. And the thing about this bank, it's another one of these similar to SVB. A lot of the depositors are very high net worth individuals. And so
we got Silicon Valley, First Republic, and that's Citizens.
I haven't looked at Citizens that closely, but I would bet that we could see JP Morgan maybe taking over First Republic, like they did with Bear Stearns in 2008.
Now, here's one of the biggest things is at this current moment when all banks are pretty much in the same boat, taking on losses, and would one of the bigger banks be willing to take on a bank they know is not going to really be as profitable or productive, apart from what the regulators decide to backstop and prop up? How much can they really benefit off doing this other than keeping the contagion from spreading? Like they're all working together to keep this thing contained as best they can. And so within all of that, there's nothing valid, nothing solid other than failing sovereign debt. So,
but I think the Fed would probably help JP Morgan, of course. They create these special purpose vehicles in offshore centers off the balance. And I think First Republic has a lot of wealthy depositors. It's good business for JP Morgan. They lost Epstein after all.
Yeah.
Just a joke. He was a good client for them.
Oh my goodness. Mr. Epstein still ain't seen our list yet, but hopefully we get the chance to see that list for summertime. It'll give us something more to talk about. But all right, man, we're at that 45-minute mark. I appreciate everybody. Here's another one here. Lawrence Frank says, what are your opinions on a potential Amero dollar? I haven't heard that being mentioned in a while. See what happening. See that happening with the whole Mexico drama. They brought it up a month ago or so. Haven't heard about the Amero dollar. I know that was a part of the union. I mentioned that the other day when Mexico, U.S., and Canada was supposed to join forces. I think that was under the If Hillary Clinton would have won, they would have.
I don't think that's in the cards anymore. If anything, I don't think Mexico would be looking to join forces with the U.S. and Canada. I think they're much more willing to play ball with the BRICS now.
Right. I'd agree. So we'll just have to wait and see which canary drops next, which domino drops next. Definitely it's going to be something, because it's tomorrow's Friday. We're going to the weekend. Of course, central banks will be meeting from here on out, trying to come up with something to keep this thing going. But in the meantime, everybody here tuned in know the importance of, taking possession of whatever you think is yours, because right now people are finding out that, if you can't hold it, do you own it, and vice versa. So, all right, Mr. Mario, as always, my friend, it's good to connect with you. Have a good day golfing tomorrow. And I hope you guys got some good weather, and everybody else tuned in. Be blessed, be safe. Continue to get your weight up and stay prayed up. So, and I'll see you guys later.
See you.
Peace.